We'll begin momentarily. Still waiting for Tanya. Well, good evening, everyone. It is now 6 o'clock on Tuesday, September 7th, 2021. The City Council for the City of Woodland is now in session. We've just returned from a closed session in which there is no reportable action. So we'll now continue to the regular calendar. We've called to order, and Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Vega.
Present.
Councilmember Fernandez.
Present.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena.
Present.
Councilmember Landsberg.
Present.
Mayor Stallard.
Present, thank you. The record will reflect that all members of the council are in attendance tonight. Our city manager is absent tonight, and in his absence, our finance director and director of administrative services, Kimberly McKenna, will be standing in. Kimberly, we're so glad to have you. Why don't you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance while you're at it, okay?
Okay.
Let's stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Kimberly. All right. We'll now go to public comment. Madam Clerk, is there any public comment on items otherwise on our agenda tonight?
I do have one email. It's from Communicate CCIB, and it's speed limit removal. I'll go ahead and read it. The usage of speed limits on public roads has increased traffic congestion, decreased roadway safety, and reduced property values and economic output. This policy has made public roads less helpful in transporting people, freight, and other necessities. This inefficiency is due to the lower speeds at which vehicles can transport people and freight and the increase in traffic congestion. In addition, the roadway is less safe because of speed limits, and it increases the likelihood of accidents. Speed limits signage, especially those displaying a lower numerical value, diminishes neighboring properties, aesthetics affecting businesses, individuals, and commercial and residential property values. The speed limits have also reduced the economic output of businesses and individuals, making it less cost competitive to do business or reside in areas with speed limits. Policymakers should have speed limits withdrawn. Please remove speed limits on public roads. That's it.
Thank you.
That was
all right.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was. No public comment beyond that, Madam Clerk?
No.
All right. I should also mention that this meeting, as all our meetings the last year and a half, is being conducted electronically by Zoom in accordance with the governor's executive order. We still invite participation from members of the public. You can raise your hand if you're live with us on Zoom. You can send an email for the clerk to read on any item on our agenda, or you can phone call in. So we're always happy to hear from our citizens. Thank you. All right, that takes us to communications from the council. And well, let's start with you, Vicki. Councilmember Fernandez.
Thank you, Mayor Stallard. I'd like to begin by thanking our city staff who
was instrumental in organizing a meeting for the Campbell Park neighborhood. So I just want to thank Chief Caff, our city manager, Ken Hyatt, Brent Meyer, Katie Wurtzel, Brian Olson with the Woodland PD, Victoria Dansel, Morgan Snedeker, and I believe Sergeant Elliott. So just want to thank them for taking their time to address the needs and concerns of the residents in the Campbell Park area, along Thomas and Colette specifically, regarding traffic issues and other concerns in the area. Hopefully we'll be able to continue to have more of this community dialogue with our residents. So thank you so much for your help with that. And also, I just would like to ask a brief question that I received from one of the residents regarding the picnic tables out there. I believe they've gone from 4 tables under the gazebo area or awning down to 1. And so they have a question regarding that. So if we can maybe clarify that for them, I would appreciate that. And I'll touch bases with maybe Christine regarding that. And also want to just recognize Woodland Community College for their celebration and grand opening of the Dream Center out at Woodland Community College that I was able to attend. So a nice new area that was designed to make students feel welcome into the campus, primarily focusing on some of our undocumented students. So thank you to President Pimentel for that new facility and organization of that event. Also was able to attend the Spring Lake Woodland with the Woodland Joint Unified District and the Spring Lake parents out at the Spring Lake Elementary. Lots of positive dialogue with parents and the Woodland Joint Unified School District president and Associate Superintendent Elodia Lampkin. And so again, thank you for all their willingness to come out and advocate for their concerns. Other item I'd also like to make note of is the American Legion Post 77 unveiling of the Deported Veterans Project out there on one of their walls. So thank you for that new artistic representation of the struggle that some of our veterans are having to endure. Thank you to Mayor Pro Tem Myra Vega for representing the city, and to Jesse Ortiz, Dr. Jesse Ortiz, for organizing that event with the Post 77. Also want to mention that on September 11th at 6:50, there'll be a flag raising at Woodland PD and commemorating the 20th anniversary of 9/11, the tragedy that occurred in New York with the Twin Towers. So if anyone is up and ready to go at that hour, we would love to see you out there at 6:50 a.m. Also, vaccination clinic being held on 9/11 at the Woodmark Apartments between 10 and noon. If you're a resident in that area, or if you haven't had a vaccine yet, you may come out there and visit and get your vaccine out at the Woodmark Apartments, which is 700 Kinchlow Court. And I also just want to make a note and tell Stephen Coyle that I wish him well on his soon-to-be retirement, and unfortunately was unable to attend his luncheon, but want to thank him for his service to the city of Woodland and for your expertise and professionalism for the city of Woodland. So thank you, Stephen Coyle. And one last thing, just remember to vote if you haven't voted yet. The election, you've received your ballot, so please take time to vote, hopefully by September 13th. Thank you, Mayor Saldo. I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Councilmember Fernandez. Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Myra Vega. And I also want to say thank you for covering the event at the American Legion for the deported veterans. Thank you, Myra.
Thank you, Mayor Seller. It is my pleasure. And I just want to encourage the community to go out and check out the mural. It's beautiful. So it's the Leave No One Behind mural project. I learned a lot about the project and the stories. So each one of the faces in the mural represents a deported veteran. So take time to learn their stories and certainly to learn more about the project. It's a beautiful, beautiful site. So please stop by and check it out. I just wanted to highlight a few things. I really appreciate the August 26th Spring Lake Park community meeting. The Spring Lake Parks is a topic that a lot of community members are interested in. Certainly the finishing of the Spring Lake specific plan is something I hear a lot about from constituents. So I do appreciate, first of all, reaching out, requesting input. The specific plan is 20 plus years old. Many of us didn't live here then, so I really appreciate having input and taking a look at that plan and informing it and changing it as appropriate based on community input. So thank you so much. I do appreciate that outreach to the community. And I want to thank Councilwoman Vicky Fernandez for attending the September 1st Spring Lake neighborhood school meeting. I do want to highlight that, you know, we're certainly understanding and sympathetic to the situation that a lot of Spring Lake families who are looking who had hope for a neighborhood school and the struggles they're having with that not being a reality. So I really I know City Manager Ken Hyatt was there listening, and I think it's just important that we hear the perspectives of the families that are experiencing these issues. I'm looking forward to the flag raising on September 11th to commemorate, come together as community and commemorate this tragedy and just come together. And I just wanted to share something. You know, I recently participating in a leadership development program, and there's a quote that I want to share from a facilitator. He starts off our meeting by saying that he wants us to have mercy and grace. And as I'm out in the community and talking to folks, I know there's a lot of frustration with the pandemic, with things that are going on around the world, the economic environment. And I just want to ask our community members with each other, have mercy and grace. These are really hard times. The pandemic is taking us in the wrong direction again. And I think at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We're all here. We all coexist, and just take time to have mercy and grace. That'll be all, Mayor Steller. Thank you.
That was plenty, Myra. Thank you so much. Council Member Richard Landsberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish to thank the police department's crime prevention unit for putting together another public meeting for the residents at Ralph Harris Park who have significant concerns about the ongoings at Ralph Harris Park. What people may want to know is that we've already taken some steps to alleviate the concerns at Ralph Harris Park, but certainly we can do more. We're going to do more. But one thing I walked out of that meeting, Mr. Mayor, with ideas on how we as a city can further engage our communities, whether it be Ralph Harris Park or Campbell Park or any park, by having some city events in those parks so that citizens can come out, whether it be a watermelon feast or a ice cream social, something to bring the community out to our parks and get people to know each other and engage with each other. One thing our crime prevention unit emphasized was the need for more participation in Neighborhood Watch. And one thing we walked away from that meeting was these folks are going to form a Neighborhood Watch, which I think is significant. So thanks again to Police Department, in particular, Crime Prevention Unit. Mr. Mayor, I did attend the Steve Coyle luncheon, I think it was last week sometime. We will miss Steve for all the work he's done regarding the homeless issues in Woodland, but you know, he's not going far. He's still going to remain in Woodland, in a historic home that he lives on College Street, but he's also going to be a consultant on homeless issues. So we will continue to see Steve play a significant role in alleviating concerns of homelessness in our community. Mr. Mayor, last weekend I attended the C10 intervention on Main Street, which was a pretty good deal for our city. And I wish to thank those folks at Visit Woodland who worked hard on this event, in particular, Evie, who put a lot of time and effort into making this a very successful event. I spent a couple hours, Mr. Mayor, talking to people who were watching the parade on Saturday night and asked them where they were from. And we got a lot of visitors from Sacramento, Vacaville, Bay Area, all over the place. And the question I asked them, what do you think of our city? And I didn't get a single negative response. They love our downtown. They love how we allow this event to go on. And they thinking about coming back for other events in the future. So that was my takeaway from that event. And I also noticed that our businesses were doing pretty well that weekend. So I was hoping for the best for them, and let's keep our fingers crossed and never studying good. Lastly, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to continue to raise this issue every time I speak, and that is we are in a drought. I continue to see water wasted in our community. In particular, we're watering the sidewalks and the pavement. No need for that. Water draining down the gutters, no need for that. We have got to pay more attention to our water needs in our community. And I'll continue to raise that issue every time I speak, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you for raising that issue, Councilmember Landsberg. Clearly, we all need to be thinking a lot about that. All right, Councilmember Tanya Garcia Cadena.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. By going last, a lot of things have already been covered here. Well, not quite last. You'll be going.
You're not last. I have probably nothing left for me. Go ahead.
That's right. Okay. Well, along with Councilmember Landsberg, I also was able to attend the Harris Park Community Forum that was held at Woodland PD by their crime prevention specialists. And I agree with everything that Councilmember Landsberg said. And it sounded like those community members were very interested in holding events in the park. One thing that they did express was they would like to see us attend those events with them. And I think that that's really kind of key to getting people back out into these types of events and taking back their parks, is if we are there showing support as well. Let's see, I attended Steve Coyle's retirement luncheon, and I do wish him well. I also had the opportunity, I don't know if anyone else has seen them, but well, I know that Rich has. We have our 150th baseball caps that are out and available. And so I worked a table at the farmer's market and sold a few caps. And then this past Friday, for the first Friday Art Walk, I went and I shared a table with the group from Healthy Davis Together. Unfortunately, while I was there, they did not give any vaccines out, which they were hoping to, but there were a lot of people that were curious and asking questions. And then I was also able to share about our upcoming events, and people seemed really excited about that. At Friday night's event, the majority of people that I spoke to were from Woodland. So that was really great. And then I also attended the C10 intervention activities on Saturday, a little bit on Sunday. But it was wonderful to see so many people downtown. I talked to some of our shop owners. They said they were busy. Restaurants were busy. My understanding is that our hotels were booked, and that's a wonderful thing for our community. So I was really happy to see something like that. You know, it reminded me of our cruises from back in the late 70s, early 80s. Not as rowdy, thank goodness. It was very well organized and well attended. And I think I'll stop right there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Tanya. Appreciate it all. Well, for myself, I have to share the sad news that this is the tree that we're having to take down. This tree is about 400 years old. It's on Casa Linda, and literally it was here before anything here today was here. It's one of the few trees from that era surviving. We had to run the street around it, as you know if you've driven on Casa Linda. but the neighbors were very concerned about its safety, prompting the city to do an extensive study that even included being able to send sound waves into the core of the tree. And the result was that the tree is about 3/4 not very good inside, deteriorated. So with the prospect of the tree falling sometime in the next 20 years, it seemed in the interest of safety that the tree's time had come. So this Thursday and Friday, possibly a little longer, crews will be removing the tree. I want to thank the Woodland Tree Foundation for their involvement. They've insisted that certain parts of the tree be retained, what they call cookies, a cross section will be retained and marked with different things that happen throughout the life of the tree, and perhaps even a park bench or two might be able to be milled out of parts of the tree. So that's a sad thing. If you have a chance, go by and say your goodbyes to that wonderful, wonderful, majestic giant. Second item is at the Greater Sacramento Economic Development Retreat that I attended 2 weeks ago. I learned that First Northern Bank and 2 other community banks have committed to lending $100 million for the construction of affordable housing. Now, these are not grants, but a commitment to place money for this important purpose. And anyone who works in that area knows one of the biggest problems is finding source of financing. So these banks are committing to help with that. I also want to mention tonight, I'm so happy about the truck show. I'm glad it was a big success, and congratulations to everybody who had anything to do with it. I share my colleagues' appreciation for Steve Coyle, who is a delightful presence in our community, in our city, and our community, and I'm so grateful he will continue to be here, and his passion for housing for the homeless he'll be pursuing as an independent consultant. Now, tonight, as we conclude our meeting, I'm asking that we adjourn in memory of 3 really great Woodlanders that we've lost since our last meeting. The first is retired Fire Captain Eldon Naff. Maybe not so well known to everybody. He hasn't lived here in recent years, but he was a great part of our community, a much beloved member of our fire department, Eldon Naff. And then secondly, I want to mention our long-term YMCA director, long retired now, Bruce Alquist. A very gentle giant of a man, did a lot for a lot of people, and so appreciated by everybody who loves our YMCA. And then the third is our retired Yolo County Assessor, Alan Flory. Alan served 3 terms as our assessor, worked at the statewide level for the Board of Equalization, and trained people basically in the Western United States in this field. And not to say nothing of the fact, he's probably one of the most active community volunteers I've ever known, but always did it quietly in so many engagements. So when we adjourn tonight, it'll be in memory of those 3 great individuals. And now for my Mayor's Minute. I would just like to say thank you to Healthy Davis Together for their commitment to our community as it responds to the COVID-19 challenges. This group has spearheaded testing, which can now be done Mondays through Fridays at Norton Hall at 70 Cottonwood Street. The tests are quick, easy, and free. Results are posted to email or text and are generally in hand within 24 to 48 hours. They and others have continued the work of vaccinating our community. They were out there at First Friday, as Tanya mentioned, and will be at the Woodmark Apartments on Kincheloe Court at 10 a.m. this coming Saturday, as Vicki mentioned. I plan to be there too, 10 o'clock. A number of unvaccinated folks have now suffered the consequences of their failure to protect themselves, let alone those around them. This is providing added impetus to others who have resisted vaccination to step up and get it done. If you are among this group, please don't delay. We are counting on you to help us promote immunity for the entire community. And now, our acting city manager tonight, Kim McKinney, do you have anything to report?
I do not have anything to report tonight.
You made that easy, Kim. All right. Then that allows us to move along to presentations. And we have the Woodland Police Department scheduled to present their strategic plan. Excuse me, I didn't mention the long-range calendar. I presume there's no comments on that. That being the case, Chief Caff, do you want to proceed with your presentation?
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Chief Derek Caff. And tonight I'm going to be showing 12 slides, walking you through our strategic plan. And then at the end, I'd like to address any questions or concerns or clarifications that the council may have about this plan. So I am going to begin.
Let's show Chief Caff too, from time to time, instead of this presentations. Thank you. There you are. We're proud of you, Chief Caff. We want to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's see here. All right. So again, tonight, presenting on the strategic plan. So many of you, I'm sure you've heard of Peter Drucker. He's a management consultant, an educator, and an author. And he said that unless commitment is made, there are only promises and hopes, but no plans. So tonight, I am delivering the police department's commitment to improvement in the form of our 2021 to 2023 strategic plan. The police department's been without a strategic plan since 2014. And our new strategic plan is the result of over a year of intense work, public input, surveys in English and in Spanish, and now is the right time for us to renew our commitment to improving. Our plan prioritizes issues, resources, and is a framework for decision-making, explains our vision and direction, and challenges the status quo. So tonight you may need to move on your Zoom. My words primarily are on the right side of the screen, but this is the strategic planning model that we used. It's very common in organizations, not law enforcement, but as we go through this, you'll notice, so planning to plan. We started with that. Honestly, this arose out of a discussion about 4 or 5 years ago where we recognized we were operating without a strategic plan and wanted to have something that the community could hold us accountable to for specific measurable benchmarks of improvement. During this planning to plan phase, we formed a steering committee internal here in the police department that did the lion's share of the work of this plan. In the assessment phase, that's where we were able to create some self and organizational awareness through studies on call response times, call volumes, types of crimes, types of complaints, and then staffing challenges and staffing successes. And also in that time, we completed a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and then a gap analysis where we pictured a preferred future and then looked at where we are now and worked on a plan of how do we get from where we are now to that preferred future. In the issue identification portion, that was a lot of brainstorming and then clarifying and combining issues. So if you could picture like a funnel, we started out with a large group of issues that we had identified and we clarified and combined. This is also when we began the surveys, and those issues led into goals. Then we created strategies to accomplish those goals. And after tonight, we'll be moving into the evaluation phase. So here's a slide that takes a look at these surveys. There were two separate groups of surveys. At the top there are the external surveys, and at the bottom are the internal surveys. This was done both in the issue identification and the assessment phases of the strategic plan. So for our external surveys, they were during a 6-week period earlier this calendar year. We sent out thousands of surveys in both English and Spanish. Our Facebook surveys reached over 7,000 people. We direct texted surveys to over 2,000 people. And we posted flyers with QR codes in English and in Spanish in the schools, coffee shops, restaurants, grocery stores, and businesses throughout the community. I specifically want to thank the council members that personally delivered flyers, and to City Manager Hyatt and all the city staff from the other departments that assisted us with advertising our surveys. While the number of responses was not what we wanted, the results are similar to the feedback that we get at our ongoing community meetings, like those recently conducted with the council members at Schneider Park, Campbell Park, and then again at Ralph Harris Park, the one we held here at the police department. So our goals, we wanted goals that were SMART goals: specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, time-specific. And that's what we were able to come up with. The committee turned the issues that were identified by the community and our employees into goals. So now we'll walk through the 4 goals of this strategic plan. So for each of the 4 goals, you'll notice a similar format on the slides. Up there at the top, our first goal is to promote a safe community by reducing crime. And this aligns with one of the City Council's goals, strengthening public safety and infrastructure. Our strategy is to analyze processes for efficiency and effectiveness. And then you can see there through these 4 bullet points, if you will, that we're committed to reducing crime by looking at and coming up with a way to effectively use that very precious available time that officers have. We do this through directed patrol. So we take the available time that officers have and we put information into their hand on where they should be spending that available time based on the crimes and complaints that we're receiving in town, primarily around homeless issues, traffic issues, and violent crime. The second bullet point is regarding our crime analysis unit. We need to we're going to refine our crime analysis reports for the officers so that it's in a usable format that they easily access while in the field so that they have the information needed to make critical decisions about how they are spending their time. The third bullet point is in reference to the homeless action plan. We have been very involved and working with the other city departments on the homeless action plan, and we're committed to refreshing that homeless action plan. To a number of the items in the current homeless action plan have been accomplished, and new issues have arisen as the landscape has changed, especially with the opening of the new shelter. And then finally, planning for growth and event planning in the community. This best practices study, that's super important. And we know that just because we have operated in a similar fashion in the past and have had success, there may be other jurisdictions out there that have fresh ideas, new ideas that are being successful in their communities. We want to take those best ideas from the other communities, modify them to Woodland's needs, and then implement those programs here in Woodland. Our next goal is to improve traffic and pedestrian safety by reducing injury and traffic collisions. This aligns with a couple of council goals to improve the quality of life and again to strengthen public safety infrastructure. Our strategy is to take a look at our service delivery and staffing models. So we are going to conduct a traffic study and update the motor officer deployment schedule. Currently, they are assigned to specific days and times for the start time of their shift. We are going to look at all of the times for collisions and citations and complaints, and then adopt our deployment strategy based on that. Now, we may find at the end of this study that our current model is sufficient, but it is still a worthy goal that we do take a look at that and make sure that it is appropriate. With COVID and the shutdown, traffic patterns changed, and we have seen an increase in traffic complaints, especially speeding vehicles. And so by looking at when our motors are available to enforcement activities, we'll be able to better respond to those complaints. The second bullet item is exploring the possibility of increasing professional staff for traffic collision reporting and parking enforcement. There's a lot of duties that you don't need to be a sworn police officer to do. one of those very time-consuming duties is taking non-injury traffic collision reports. And so we will be working with the other city staff to look at plans for increasing professional staff abilities. And then internally, we're going to be looking at our processes and assignments to see if we can't maximize that in addition with existing personnel. The third bullet item, pursuing Office of Traffic Safety grants for equipment and overtime reimbursement. We want to make sure that we are leveraging city dollars with as much grant dollars as possible so that we can put the maximum effort behind traffic safety. And then the fourth one, planning for city growth and special events. In Woodland, our special events primarily occur at a number of set locations, for instance, the downtown corridor. And so by refining our plans, having better communication with not just our law enforcement partners, but with the fire department, with the hospital, and with the event organizers, will create a better safety plan because the landscape around large-scale events and the threats behind the possibilities of violence at large-scale events has changed. And so we need to be ready for that. And as far as city growth goes, as the city continues to grow, we need to make sure that we're meeting the traffic safety needs and we're engaged from the beginning as that growth occurs. Goal number 3 is enhancing communication, both externally and internally. And this aligns with improving the quality of life city council goal. So we have 2 strategies here. One is external transparency. The first bullet item, we are going to conduct at least 2 town hall meetings each year where we can go and listen to the community and also provide an update on the current landscape of safety in the community. I'm looking forward to these town hall meetings. We've done them, on a variety of scales and with a variety of frequency in the past, but this is our commitment to do at minimum 2 full city town hall meetings a year. The second bullet item, enhancing our neighborhood watch program and volunteers and policing program, because both of those programs are very effective. Earlier in the meeting, we talked about the need for increasing neighborhood watch. But another one that we are firmly committed to is expanding the volunteers and policing program, because just like expanding, our services through professional staff, the volunteer program is a wonderful resource for getting not only just extra eyes and ears, but extra work accomplished both internally in the department and within the community. We have a number of volunteers that patrol for us currently, and we want that number to grow. The third bullet point, creating a community engagement focus group with personnel from inside the department and community members to provide recommendations on ways to increase those meaningful interactions between the community and the department. And this is about, taking a look at programs like Coffee with a Cop, those non-enforcement scenarios that allow the community to, one, get to know our staff, but more importantly, to remind our staff of how wonderful the community is. As a law enforcement officer, you go from call to call or tragedy to tragedy. And sometimes after, a while of that can affect how you view the community. And these non-enforcement scenarios have been shown to increase officer safety and resilience, decrease use of force, and increase morale within the department. So we're looking forward to that community engagement focus group. And then finally, the fourth one for the external transparency is establishing a youth police advisory council. And this is, this was brought up during one of my chief's advisory board meetings. They pointed out that while I currently have one youth on the council, she's 17 years old. I think if you looked back on when you were 17 years old, and if you sat on a council with a bunch of other adults, many of them who are very successful, others who are very passionate, you may not feel as comfortable to speak up about what your concerns and needs are. And this Youth Police Advisory Council will establish norms, and allow them an opportunity to provide that information directly to me about how the police department can better engage and protect our youth within the community. The second part of goal number 3 is our internal communication. We are establishing a meeting with members from all of the various divisions within the department so that we can collaboratively problem solve. Right now, and it's not unique to law enforcement or Woodland PD, but many institutions end up getting siloed with information. The goal of this meeting is to break those silos and get us all focused on working together to solve problems. Those monthly meetings have already, they have occurred in the past, but they weren't, again, with frequency. And this is our commitment to maintaining these monthly meetings. We're also going to be creating timely videos to educate our staff on changes to initiatives and priorities. I currently do one video a month, just a short 5-10 minute video to our staff, updating them on a variety of topics. And my staff, they'll ask for, hey, why are we doing this process in this way? And then I'll explain that during the videos. This goal is I will continue doing my monthly videos, but I'm going to be bringing in department experts to walk through that and get this pushed out to a broader reach within the department of experts talking on those videos. And then finally, myself and my command staff to deliver 2 state of the department addresses internally to our staff every year. We've all had jobs where it's been unclear what is expected of us. And sometimes that can just be a breakdown in communication. By committing to these 2 meetings a year, we'll be able to refresh, retune, and realign ourselves into a common vision and be able to work towards being more efficient and effective. And our 4th goal, developing our personnel to succeed. This aligns with strengthening public safety and infrastructure, and the strategy is employee development. I'm sure many of you are aware that for those officers that were hired in the mid-90s, of which we have a lot, many of them are rapidly approaching the end of their service career. And so we are focusing on ensuring we are preparing our staff to assume positions of greater responsibility. And we're going to do that through a number of ways. The first bullet item talks about a training focus group. And it's not just us. We are going to involve members of the community so that we're ensuring we're meeting their training needs and opportunities and training on the types of things that the community wants us training on. As cops, we love to train on tactics, on procedures, on the nuts and bolts of our jobs. But in reality, customer service, how we deliver service, is just as important as all of those tactics and other typical trainings. And so we'll be inviting the community members to participate in this and help shape what we will be training on over the next 2 years. The second bullet item, reevaluating our training plan for each position to ensure that as we go through this impending transition of personnel between assignments and positions, we have people who are ready to step right in and begin the work immediately. We want a number of people that know how to do every single job and responsibility within the police department. The third bullet item, establishing a formal mentorship program across all specialty assignments and ranks. Again, meeting those needs of the employees so that they can be prepared to take on additional responsibilities and jobs. And then finally, developing an actionable succession plan to address the upcoming vacancies that I spoke of just a minute ago. This one, there are 2 more bullet points here. These are in the strategy is staffing and recruitment. We are developing a multi-generational talent acquisition team to take a look at how are we hiring and who are we attracting and how can we better attract diverse candidates for both our sworn and professional staff. We've been doing a good job, honestly, recently of that. I'm happy to report that just today, our city clerk, Ana Gonzalez, joined us as we administered the oath of office to our newest police officer, Aisha Flores. She just began work with us yesterday and will be entering the FTO program in a little less than 2 weeks. But we want to make sure that we have a public commitment to making sure we're reaching out and prioritizing people from Woodland, because that is who we hope to fill all of our vacancies with, honestly. But if the person can't be from Woodland, then we want to attract the best candidates that'll meet the needs of Woodland. And then finally, developing a plan to better utilize our social media to attract those qualified and diverse candidates right here to our department. Social media is forever changing. I certainly am not an expert at this, but luckily my staff and with the help of a consultant, we've had a lot of good success along these lines recently. But as the landscape continues to change, we want to make sure that we stay relevant and engaged so that we can attract those candidates that will be serving here for the next 30, 35 years. So as we move into the evaluation phase of this process, we need to know how will we know that we're going to be successful? Well, through regular review, established timelines, and milestones, this designated strategy has owners for each of those bullet items that we just talked about. So there's actually a name. And when we push out the strategic plan, you and members of the community will have the names of those owners of each of the project, so that as I come back and report to the Public Safety Subcommittee every 6 months on the status of each of these strategies, we'll have a point of accountability, myself being the end point of accountability for progress. We want strategic planning to be woven into the fabric of the PD and into the community so that we can begin our next training cycle, our next strategic plan in January of 2023 for the 2024 and 2025 strategic plan. And, as Peter Drucker also said, plans are only good intentions unless they immediately degenerate into hard work. So with the public presentation of this plan, we'll now immediately begin working on these goals and strengths. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and allow questions.
I can see we can have a gallery view now. Thank you, Chief, for that comprehensive report. And 2 Peter Drucker quotes. I'm going to give my favorite Peter Drucker quote. He said, "Constructive criticism is dead. Who wants to be criticized anyway?" So you can take that one home. Now, let's see, Madam Clerk, do we have any member of the public who wishes to offer a comment or thought on this?
Let me double check here. No.
All right. Then I'm just going to rotate through my council members to see if there's any comments or questions. Council Member Garcia Cadena.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Chief Caff. So one thing that really stood out for me, I think the plan is great, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it as you implement it. But the Youth Police Advisory Council, what a great addition that is, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that implemented and hearing from our youth. So thank you for thinking of them and including them.
Thank you.
That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Vega.
Thank you, Mayor Seller. Chief Caff, thank you. Great presentation. I am very, very excited and energized about your plan. Just a couple of things that jumped out at me, your plan and the strategic priorities to really source from our community and to come up with that's a strategy that requires you all to look into our community and start early on. So I'm really thrilled to see that happening. It would be my vision that the majority of the police department, grew up here in Woodland, and what a great representation of our community. So thank you for doing that, having that as a priority. I also want to call out some things that I was really impressed by, and I'm really looking forward to seeing them continue to fruition, is just the engagement with the community. So that interaction, sharing the updates, in the absence of communication, then folks' minds wander. So I've had the pleasure of participating in the Unidos, the Paletas program. It is just phenomenal to see the staff interact with the community members, with young kids. And I think it's events like that and really weaving those into the ongoing operations of the police department that are going to make a difference in our community. I'm very much looking forward to seeing those accountable parties attached to each of those strategies and seeing the progress and seeing all those things alive and well in the community. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem Vega. Councilmember Fernandez.
Thank you, Mayor Stallard. Again, thank you, Chief Calf. I want to thank you again for your presentation, and also just want to give my appreciation for your immediate action on some of the items that you have included in your presentation, but I was personally able to witness with the Campbell Park neighborhood. They were very thankful for your immediate attention on their concerns. And I think that builds trust within our community, that they know that they were heard and that you're willing to take action to meet their needs. So I'm excited about the implementation, as my other colleagues have mentioned, but I trust in your commitment to follow through with our community members. I am especially proud of the fact that you talked about the diversity of the police department, not only people from Woodland, but police officers that look like the residents of Woodland. So the diversity is, I think, extremely important to me, to know that we're looking to promote that within our community. And I'm sure that the language needs of our community will also be addressed by your department. So thank you for your efforts, and I look forward to the implementation of this project.
Thank you, Councilmember Fernandez. Before I give the floor to my colleague, Councilmember Landsberg, I'd just like to say, Rich, I think that was a really great idea you had in your council report about more events in our parks, and how simple just to get maybe 20 watermelons and just start cutting them up and tell everybody we're having watermelon out at the park and have a community opportunity. And maybe we have some officers there and firefighters, just so we have a chance to mix and mingle. So that's a great idea. Christine Engel, I know you're on the line as our community services director. Perhaps we can work with you to make that happen. Rich, thoughts on this presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief Cap, every time I hear you speak, I always think about the time that we considered appointing you, and I'll tell you that I've never regretted that decision. So I want to thank you for your leadership at our police department. Well, having said that, having been involved in strategic plans of police departments myself, sometimes they lay on a shelf. And one of the problems of strategic plans, and Myron probably knows this better than anybody in a hospital setting, just because you have a strategic plan doesn't mean it's going to be implemented and work. It requires a top and bottom approach. So my question to you, Chief, is this: will you be at the helm of this plan, or will you be handing it off?
Excellent question. No, I certainly will be at the helm. And, honestly, this was getting the organization and the community back into the strategic planning process took a lot of effort. We were out of the habit, and we learned some really good lessons about I wouldn't call them failures, but missed opportunities, specifically in additional ways we could have received input on the creation of this plan. I will be ultimately responsible and taking the lead on this, but I have a really talented staff too. One of them is really good at graphic arts. And I'm speaking of my executive assistant, Trista Kennedy. She is helping me with the design of the plan. And then what we are going to be doing is she is creating posters so that we can keep these items on the forefront of the officers' minds, with the idea being that as progress is made, we want to constantly be messaging about this to the staff so that it stays on their minds. The reason we put those people, the individuals in there for accountability, they start having meetings with me within the next 2 weeks. I'll be meeting with each of the assigned people so that the expectations are very clear. And if they need to ask questions about what is the end goal behind any of those strategies, we'll be able to work that out right from the beginning. I'll keep myself accountable by these 6 months reports to the Public Safety Subcommittee. I want this to be a standing agenda item on the 6-month mark so that we can report on the progress of each of those positions. Many of these strategies will take high-level employee involvement, but some of them are honestly going to be able to be accomplished or worked on by some of our line level folks as well. I spoke to all of the employees first. I wanted them to hear the plan first, directly from me. So I attended all the briefings, each of the work group briefings as well. So not just patrol, but all of the specialty assignments, and was able to answer questions and honestly, maybe alleviate a little bit of fear over what is a strategic plan? Why do we have a strategic plan, and why is it needed? So I think we have good momentum at this point. I'm looking forward to the rollout now of the plan.
Thank you. And my last question to you, Chief, is this. A plan is a great, it's good to have a plan. But what you do with the plan is important to me. And as I understand, as most strategic plans go, they stay internal and they don't make it out to the public. What plans do you have to make sure that our public, our 63,000 residents, will know, A, that you have a plan, and B, that you're implementing it?
Absolutely. It's something that we will be reporting on through the quarterly report as well, the mentions of those plans. But my executive assistant, she's actually created a web page. It's on the police department's webpage. This will be a new tab as of tomorrow. Everything will go live tomorrow, and the public will be able to access that. And so you can simply search Woodland Police Department, California Strategic Plan, and that page will then come up in your search results so you can see the plan right there. And we'll provide the updates every 6 months, and so that page will get refreshed with the progress as well.
Great, thank you. That's it.
All right.
Mayor, thank you.
And thank you, colleagues. Chief, I also, again, appreciated your presentation. Two things. I appreciated the fact that you integrated council goals as foundational in developing the teeing off to the things that were most germane to your department. And I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Vega. Communication is so fundamental, and your commitment to it is obvious by what you're already doing, but it's also baked into this plan as well. One thought I had was, have you considered using the Teen Advisory Council operates at our library as a source of feedback for law enforcement concerns? I always think it's good when we work interdepartmentally wherever possible.
That's an excellent idea. I have attended twice now and talked to them about issues. They were more surrounding specific issues. That's a good idea. I'm taking a note here. I'm writing right now. I will incorporate that. Thank you very much. Might be worth asking them, would they care to be the sounding board for that area, and making sure that we have a good diverse group of youth as well. Anyway, just a suggestion to consider. Madam Clerk, has anyone yet expressed interest in addressing this question with us?
No one.
All right. Well, I think we've all had a nice opportunity then to interact with you on this. We thank you for your work and look forward to hearing more about it as you go forward. Okay.
Thank you.
That will conclude our presentations for this evening. And we'll move on to the consent calendar, which we have 11 items, items 4 through 15. Council members, is there anything anybody wishes to remove for independent consideration, or can we, or perhaps just make a comment? Vicki, I've heard that you would like to speak about the resolution.
Yes, I would. But before we get to the resolution, I just have some amendments to the minutes, if that's possible.
Please proceed with the minutes are the first item, item 4.
On item number 14 on page 6 of the minutes, or page 15 of our agenda packet. There is a motion made by Fernandez and also second by Fernandez.
Oh, shoot.
That's pretty good, Vicki. I've never been able to do that myself.
So I just want to clarify that and double check on that. And then the other item would be located on page 16, item number 15. On the votes, on the overcrossing, I voted aye on that item, and I believe Councilmember Garcia Cadena voted no.
I think that correction was made in a subsequently issued set, Vicki, that was in our email today. Is that correct,
okay.
Madam?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I did.
Correction was noted.
Okay. Thank you.
But when we take action on the consent calendar, it will be with the understanding that there will be an amendment to the minutes to reflect whoever made the second, or other than Vicki. Okay, or first other than Vicki. All right. Okay. Any additional items for independent discussion on the consent calendar tonight?
Mayor, I just have a comment on item number 8 on the consent calendar, dispatch services.
Oh, yes.
Seems to me like a year ago, I made a very similar comment, and it's this. This is a very expensive line item for our city. $2,345,000 comes out to $6,400 a day and $267 per hour, which buys you legal talent like Ethan Walsh. This is a very expensive process, a very expensive service. And I think that someday, Mr. Mayor, we have got to look at this service, what it's costing us, and what we're getting for the $2.3 million. I'm not saying that we don't need dispatch services, but in our meeting that we had regarding Harris Park, and I think Chief Calf could back me up on this, there were concerns, Mr. Mayor, about the delivery of services from dispatch center. And it's very disheartening to me, who worked in that business for 21 years, to hear that these complaints continue after all these years, even though we pay $2,345,000, $6,400 an hour a day, and $267 an hour. We deserve better than that. And I think we need to look at this and we either deal with it through the JPA or look at a different model to deliver this services. It's just too expensive. That's all I have to comment on that.
Actually, Councilmember Landsberg, I share your concerns about this. If it might be the sense of the council, I would like to request that our city manager ensure that a management study is done to see basically what it costs to provide this service and what we're getting. The city of Davis has steadfastly refused to join the JPA. I'd be interested to know what it costs the city of Davis to operate its independent center per year to see if it's comparable or in any way maybe more or less. So would you concur in that recommendation?
Yes.
Colleagues, is that all right if we ask the city manager to do that study?
Yes, I think that's a good idea.
All right. And as long as you're right with us, Chief Calf, we'll let you transmit the good news, okay? All right.
Sure, will do.
Thank you. All right. Any additional comments or discussion on an item on the consent calendar tonight?
And just want to confirm that we will do the proclamation separately.
We will do that after we vote for it, okay? If there are no further discussions, Myra?
I'm
Yes.
going to recuse myself from voting on item 15 that is near my home.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a motion other than from Mayor
Motion
Pro Tem?
by Landsberg regarding the consent calendar minus the topic that Myra Vega had.
Right.
Second by Fernandez.
All right, we have a motion by Council Member Landsberg, seconded by Council Member Vicky Fernandez to approve the consent calendar items 4 through 15 with the understanding that modest correction to the minutes will be made as brought forward by Council Member Fernandez, and that Mayor Pro Tem Vega will be recorded as supporting by her vote all the items other than item 15 from which she recuses herself. That is the motion. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Vega,
Aye.
Councilmember Fernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena,
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg,
Aye.
Mayor Stallard.
Aye. And before we proceed to our public hearing, we're going to give our colleague, Councilmember Fernandez, the opportunity to present the resolution proclaiming September 15th through October 15th, Chicano Latino Heritage Month. And I have signed the resolution, which we have just approved, and it will be made available to representatives of the Chicano Latino community. Councilmember Fernandez. You're muted. There you go.
Thank you, Mayor Stallard. And I want to thank Alma Lopez and the members of the Brown Issues who had the foresight to bring this to my attention. And I think tonight we have Elise Doyle Martinez and Alma Lopez representing Brown Issues. So I want to thank them for joining us this evening and hope that they will accept our proclamation on Chicano Latino Heritage Month. Whereas Hispanic Heritage Month was proposed in 1968 by U.S. Congressman Edward Royal and enacted into law August 17, 1988, the United States celebrates Hispanic Heritage Month beginning on September 15th through October 15th. And whereas the term Hispanic refers to communities from Spain and other Spanish-speaking, excluding Brazil, Latino refers to communities from Latin America, Chicano refers to all Spanish-speaking and original indigenous people who trace their heritage to Latin America and Africa. And whereas September 15th was chosen as this celebration's start date in order to coincide with the Independence Day, celebrations of 5 Latin American countries, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. In addition, Mexico, Chile, and Belize observed their independence on September 16th, September 18th, and September 21st, respectively. And whereas Chicano Latinos have had a profound and positive influence on our country through their strong commitment to family, faith, hard work, and service. They have enhanced and shaped our national character with countless old traditions, centuries-old traditions that reflect the multi-ethnic and multicultural custom of their community. And whereas Chicano Latino have and continue to make incalculable contributions to the neighborhoods, communities, and every sector of the community, and we are a greater and more vibrant place because of them. Whereas Chicano, Latino have and continue to serve as civil rights leaders, politicians, military service members, educators, business owners, soldiers, farm workers, first responders, science pioneers, artists, activists, public servants, colleagues, and friends in our community. And whereas the state of California is home to 15 million Latino and approximately 3,383,488 Latin students from kindergarten through grade 12, which is 54.9% of the student population of California. And whereas even within the last decade, Chicano, Latino have persisted through discrimination and recessions and continue to hold and grow our communities untethered. This month, we remember the Chicano Latinos who have long led the movement for justice and equality that are so crucial today. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Woodland and the Mayor of the City of Woodland proclaim the month beginning September 15th and ending on October 15th, 2021 as Chicano Latino Heritage Month, and encourages all the people of Woodland to commemorate this occasion with appropriate ceremonies, activities, and programs. Thank you, Mayor Stallard, for this proclamation, and thank you for the members of Brown Issues for their assistance in this proclamation.
And thank you, Councilmember Fernandez. I will put this in your box and perhaps you can present it to appropriate folks, okay?
Thank you. I will get it out to Alma and Elise Doyle. Thank you, Martinez.
All right. Well, that concludes action on the consent calendar this evening. And we only have 2 items remaining. Under public hearing, we have the City of Woodland's 6th cycle housing element. As everybody knows, we were required as a council, every city in California was required to revise its housing element by law. And so that's been underway now for some period of time. Cindy Norris, I believe, is here to present. Kimberly, did you want to do anything to introduce this? Or should we go right to Cindy?
Yeah, I think we can just let Cindy go ahead and get started on her presentation.
Well, Cindy's worked really hard on this. So Cindy, take it away.
Thank you. Can you see my PowerPoint?
We see LWC.
Okay.
All right.
Let's get this. There you go. Oh.
Yeah. You might go full page with it if you can.
Yes. Let's try that again. We'll try another avenue then. All right. Can you see me now?
Yes, you're still not full screen though. You've got,
not.
Yeah.
Let's see. How about that?
Done. Perfect.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you very much, Mayor and members of the City Council. The first thing I'd like to do is introduce our team. And I'm Cindy Norris, Principal Planner. So we also had a wonderful consultant team, Lisa Weiss Consulting, assisting us on our housing element. 2 individuals in particular that we worked with, David Bergman, the director, and Catherine Slama, who was the Senior Associate and Project Manager. Unfortunately, Catherine is not with us tonight. She's out ill. I'd also like to acknowledge Dan Sokolow, who assisted us greatly in the effort with all of his knowledge and information regarding implementation on the implementation side. So this presentation, well, first of all, we're going to tag team it. David and I will split this up so that you have 2 individuals to listen to. And this presentation will provide a general overview of the housing element requirements, the review process, findings, and key provisions. And as you've alluded to, housing elements are somewhat scripted documents. We're required to meet certain state requirements, including the newest requirement, which is called affirmatively furthering fair housing. And we'll discuss that further as part of the presentation. So the housing element before you is a robust document. It provides a large range of goals, policies, and programs to address the community's housing needs. Housing is a complex subject. There's many factors that influence housing, where and what type of housing is built. And the city is able to affect some of those factors, and that's what the housing element is all about. But there are some factors that are outside of the city's influence. So as a policy document, the housing element recognizes that providing housing for all households is an urgent necessity. And the housing element intends to build on actions and activities that the city has already taken to facilitate necessary housing. So with that, I'd like to turn the first part of this presentation over to David Bergman.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. This is a quick agenda over what we'll be discussing today. We'll talk a little bit about the basics of the housing element, and it's important to keep in mind that housing elements are tightly constrained by state law, what's included, what isn't. We'll talk a little bit about the public review draft that's been circulated. We'll cover comments that we've received by both the community and from the Department of Housing and Community Development, where we are with revisions, next steps, and an opportunity for discussion. Go to the next slide, please. Cindy, do you control the next slide? So we'll talk a little bit about the basics of a housing element. So housing element is, as both Cindy mentioned and I'll talk about it, it's one of the required elements in a general plan, like a land use element or a mobility element, noise and conservation. It's required by state law that every community include a housing element. It's also, interestingly, the only element of a general plan that needs to be reviewed and certified by the state. So as a result, you need to include certain analyses in order and methods and procedures in order to conform with state law. The goal of the housing element, though, is to make sure that the city's zoning and its land use development entitlement process can accommodate its fair share of population growth over the housing cycle, which is an 8-year time period. Go to the next slide, please. So the purpose of the housing element is to require that communities are able to absorb or accommodate their fair share of housing at various income levels, both market rate, moderate, low, and very low income housing. It also is important to recognize that the housing element process recognizes that the private sector in California develops housing. So cities are not required to build or initiate these housing projects, but rather to ensure that their zoning capacity within the city exists so that the private sector, that private developers on their own initiative can provide the required housing. One thing to keep in mind is that, as I mentioned, the housing element is the only element of the general plan that's required to be certified by the state. Housing and Community Development will review it and issue a letter of substantial compliance on the draft housing element, at which point it can be certified once it's adopted. There are consequences to not having a housing element that is certified and approved by the state, including the loss of funding, both for housing, transportation, and in extreme circumstances, the law allows for the state to take local land use authority away from the community. And next slide, please. Some of you may have been in a housing cycle process before. We're right now in the 6th cycle. So this is the 6th time that communities in California have been asked to prepare a plan to accommodate their housing growth. And in the last couple of years, Sacramento has taken a very focused interest in housing issues and has developed a series of legislation that requires municipalities to conform with state goals in the production of housing. What this has done is it's made the housing element that much more complex, and specific requirements need to be included. And we don't need to go through each one of these, but it's just to give you a sense of every time Sacramento has met over the last couple of years, we've gotten 2 or 3 new pieces of housing legislation that need to be reflected in the housing element. Next slide, please. One of the most interesting new requirements is something that came from AB 686, which requires that the housing elements that are adopted by every jurisdiction in California affirmatively further fair housing goals. So you'll hear this term AFFH. And really requires every jurisdiction to make sure that there are no impediments provided towards protected classes having access to housing in the community, and to take meaningful, that the community is required to plan for and take meaningful actions to overcome patterns of segregation and spatial dislocation for protective classes, which includes racial ethnic minorities, people with disabilities, seniors, and there's some other classes that are protected by California law. Part of the reason why this is really important, besides the substance, is the timing. So the state of California, HCD, promulgated the regulations on how communities could comply with this in basically late April, early May of this year. And as you know, the housing elements were due very soon thereafter. So the analysis was provided to HCD in July 1st as a supporting document with the draft housing element, and revised again on August 30th. And again, many communities in California have had issues with just the timeline of meeting HCD's requirements for preparing this analysis, given the fact that the regulations for how to comply with this requirement were promulgated very recently. Go to the next slide. So housing elements, again, unlike other general plan elements where there's a lot more creativity, like your land use element, you can really sort of say, what do you want this community to be like, and engage in a lot of creative thinking and problem solving. Housing element is very closely prescribed in state law what needs to be included, and there's 6 sections that are specifically required. One is a review of the past performance in previous housing cycles, particularly the most recent one, which is the 5th cycle. Looking at the needs in the community, especially focusing on special needs populations and protected classes in the state. The adequate sites inventory, which is really at the heart of the housing element, which is an identification of land that is suitably zoned to accommodate the city's share of regional housing needs, which comes to the city through a process where the state promulgates a statewide number that's broken down to regions. In Woodland's case, that's for SACOG. SACOG goes through a process where they come up with a methodology that assigns their share to each of the communities within its regions. An analysis of available resources, looking at any constraints, both governmental, so maybe something in development code, maybe something the way that permits are processed, those kinds of things that might be constraining housing, as well as non-governmental, like market or environmental conditions that are impeding housing development. And finally, an implementation plan that includes goals, policies, and quantified objectives for meeting the community's housing needs. Next slide, please.
So I'm going to handle this next section. So talking about the housing element update process. I apologize, my keyboard's not wanting to cooperate. So this little graphic illustrates kind of where we've been and where we are. The city began this process in November of 2020 with a kickoff meeting. We spent time gathering technical data. Then in the winter, we held 3 focus group meetings. Afterwards, we came up with a public review draft and issued the draft in May. We held a community workshop in June. And we're most recently at the Planning Commission in August, and now we're here at the City Council hearing for recommendation for adoption. As we will discuss in the presentation, all during the review process, the city has attempted to engage the public and received and responded to comments. So I'll spend a little bit of time just talking about the public outreach portion of it. As I mentioned, we held focus group meetings in February. There were meetings on the 9th and 10th of February. We invited over 50 participants, or 50 individuals. We had about 20 participants agree to join us, and they represented individuals who had involvement in all areas of housing. We held 3 sessions. One session focused on housing and community advocates. One session focused just on housing developers, and that was both market rate and affordable developers. And then one session focused on local businesses and institutions. So the team provided a brief presentation, but really the purpose was to have a guided discussion. We had a number of questions prepared, and that to spark the discussion, and we led the discussion. And comments and responses that we received are provided in Appendix E to the housing element. And as an example, when we did receive a comment, in many instances, there was maybe an update or a change to the housing element or a program that resulted as a result of the comments. And those changes are highlighted as shown below, either an underline or there's three sets of changes. So what we're illustrating here is in bold, underline, and yellow indicates when there was a change to the document. So next, I'd mentioned that we held a community workshop on June 2nd. Again, this was held via Zoom, and it did not appear, we had participants on the webinar. However, it's likely that people watched via the web and also on the cable channel. Comments were provided during the workshop, but then they were repeated. We did receive written comments repeating those comments received at the meeting. So again, this is a summary table just kind of showing where we've been and where we are and the next steps. So upon the adoption of the housing element and then amendment of the general plan, the city will submit the document to the State Office of Housing and Community Development. We must submit the adopted document to HCD by September 15th in order to remain on an 8-year cycle. As David had mentioned, HCD will conduct a final review and hopefully certification of our element. So what I'd like to do too is just give you a brief overview of some of the key components in the draft element. I'm not going to go over everything, but just in general, as I mentioned, it was released in May. We have several revised drafts. We did significant noticing with each meeting at each step, including all of the property owners who have sites identified as available sites in the housing element. And so one of the first things we're required to do is do a review of the previous cycle, the 5th cycle housing element. And this slide presents a summary of some of the key highlights from the prior 8-year period. Attachment 4 to the housing element provides a summary table. So the city has provided both financial assistance to several key housing projects, but has also updated significant regulatory documents in order to facilitate and stimulate housing production. So this slide shows an image of projects accomplished during the prior cycle. So as I mentioned, with a combination of funding assistance, including land donation site and dedicating that to a nonprofit housing developer, the city has realized 100 units of farm worker housing, 61 permanent supportive housing units, which are currently under construction, a 100-bed emergency shelter, land dedication for at least 112 low-income senior housing units, and that could actually be as high as 146 with a density bonus, as well as rehabilitation of 42 existing units at Cottonwood Meadows. In addition, in 2017, the city conducted, as you know, a significant update to our general plan, which included adding new land use categories, as well as increasing the density and intensity of allowed housing development throughout the city. In 2018, the city approved an interim zoning ordinance to implement those land use changes in the general plan, in which that provided multifamily as a permitted use in a number of zoning districts. And in 2020, we added objective design standards to the interim zoning, which basically streamlines any housing development proposal that comes forward that meets those objective development standards. It's a staff level approval. We've had one project so far that has come forward and come through that entitlement review process, which is at the northwest corner of Ashley in Maine. In 2019, the city updated MPFP fees to facilitate infill and smaller unit development, and which in effect encourages affordability by design. And the city's also conducted a couple of updates to our affordable housing ordinance. So not shown, the city also received LEAP and REAP grants in order to fund an update to the comprehensive zoning ordinance, as well as follow up with a future fee analysis once the new code is updated. So just a brief summary of some of the key characteristics and trends that we identified in the needs assessment. Appendix B of the housing element provides a summary of the city's socio-demographic characteristics. It reviews existing and projected housing needs and goes through things such as population characteristics, household information, housing stock, and tenure, just as some examples. So this graphic shows the overall steady population growth in the city of Woodland since 2011. Yellow County is shown as the blue line, and we've kept consistent pace with Yolo County and the region generally as a whole. As provided in the recently released 2020 census, the city has grown by an estimated 5,564 individuals, or a 10% change since 2020. So this slide illustrates renter versus owner characteristics or tenure. In Woodland, which is shown in blue, ownership is shown in blue and renter households are shown in orange, and it compares with Yolo County. So in Woodland, there are 54.8% households are ownership households. 45.2% of all households are renter households in the city of Woodland. Another key issue that the housing element delves into is housing cost and affordability. And what this is, it's housing cost compared to your ability to pay. And a household is considered cost burdened, or that they're overpaying for when they have to pay 30% or more of their gross income on housing costs. A severe cost burden is when a household pays more than 50% on housing. So as summarized on the slide, approximately 1/3 of Woodland households are either cost burdened or severely cost burdened. 25% of owners and 47% of renters are cost burdened. And this slide illustrates that for renters, the majority of extremely low, very low, and low income households are cost burdened. So this slide is summarizing a number of key issues that are provided in the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Analysis, or AFFH, review. As David had mentioned, the AFFH provides an assessment of fair housing by evaluating disparity in housing needs, access to opportunities, and patterns of racial and ethnic segregation. The AFFH analysis is consistent with the very recently released HCD guidance document. And one of the tools used in the analysis is what's known as a TCAC map, a tax credit allocation committee is what that stands for. So the TCAC maps are prepared by HCD as well as this committee using census and other data. And what the TCAC map identifies are what are called areas of resource. And it identifies areas from what's considered highly segregated to areas that have the highest resources. And factors used to determine these resources are things such as income, education attainment, home values, distance from job resources as example. So as, you'll notice for this example for Woodland, high resources identified with a blue color, moderate resources identified in green, and low resources identified in sort of the yellowy green color. So overlaying on this map are the identified regional housing needs housing sites, which we'll talk about a little bit further. They're shown in shades of orange on the map. And the last piece of information that's identified on this map are existing and proposed affordable housing sites. And these are affordable housing sites that have or will have some measure of restriction for rent. This is provided in attachment 5 as well as figure 28 in the appendix F to the housing element. So as in the end, the analysis identified 2 issue areas. The first one was called disparity in access to opportunity, and the second one was called displacement risk. And so disparity in access to opportunity deals with the concern that there's a concentration of lower income sites in the low resource areas. And then the displacement risk deals with the fact that there's high housing costs for housing burden for renters and limited deed restricted housing in the city center. So as a result, a number of programs have been included in the housing element that are specific to addressing those 2 issue areas that were identified. Again, they're summarized in table 1.1 of the housing element. So regarding disparity in access to opportunity, some of the programs deal with completing the update to the comprehensive zoning ordinance, which would expand residential opportunities. Compiling a list of all non-vacant sites that are also candidates for future housing development. And actually, in fact, interestingly enough, in a number of situations, the areas of housing that we have people interested in developing actually are not necessarily vacant sites. They may be sites with, older structures that are torn down and redeveloped. Another area is additional zoning code updates to update standards consistent with state requirements for things such as farm worker housing, density bonus, emergency shelter requirements, and continue to support first-time homebuyer programs. Programs to address the issue and concern of displacement. First is to assist with preservation and conservation of existing affordable units and those that are at risk of converting to market rate. Continuing to support our fair housing efforts and regularly reviewing the affordable housing ordinance. So with that, I'm going to turn the next section over to David to talk about the regional housing needs allocation.
Thank you, Cindy. Go to the next slide. So here's a term I bet you all have heard a lot or have heard the phrase and maybe have never had decomposed for you. And that's this word RHNA, because RHNA is what drives the housing element. And the RHNA is the regional housing needs allocation. And it comes about, actually what ends up happening is two branches of the, or two agencies within the executive branch, within the governor's office, Housing and Community Development and Department of Finance, come up with a statewide total of how many housing units they anticipate will be required to meet the state's needs for growth over 8 years. And then those are proportioned out to each of the councils of government, each of the regional councils. So again, for Woodland, this was for SACOG. And then it's up to each of the COGs to come up with a methodology or formula for distributing what this need allocation is to each of the cities and to the unincorporated counties within their area of responsibility. So this table here shows you what SACOG's was required to allocate a little over 153,000 new dwelling units over the last 8 years, of which Woodland's share was a little over 3,000. And another thing that's important to recognize about the RHNA allocation is that it requires the cities to show that they can accommodate the housing needs at varying levels of affordability, which is tied to some legal definitions of median housing. This is what that AMI means, is the area median income. So a very low income from 30 to 50% of the area median income, for low 50 to 80, and so on. It's important to keep in mind that it's also calibrated by the size of the household. So the median income for a 4-person household in Yolo County is $92,500. So that's what all of these affordability requirements are based. So basically a third of the units in Woodland need to be affordable to people who are making less, a household that's making less than that 92,500. Let's go to the next slide, please. A little more detail here on the income categories. So there's the requirement for Woodland was to find capacity to accommodate 663 units that could hold low-income households, could be accommodated by low-income households of 27,000 to 46,000, approximately 400 units for low income, which is up to 74,000, and then moderate income and above, which would be above 110,000. So affordable housing is considered affordable if occupants can pay no more than 30% of their income on housing costs. And these income categories are defined in both state and federal law, where these figures come from. One thing to keep in mind is that HCD uses density measures. So how many units that could be zoned, that the allowable units per acre, they use that as the proxy indicator of affordability. It's not that, again, that the housing needs to be provided specifically at these cost levels in the sites inventory. You can go to the next slide, please. So I've used this term sites inventory a couple of times, and that's really in many respects what's at the heart of the housing element. It talks about how many dwelling units have been assigned from the RHNA, what's in the pipeline, so what's already being developed in Woodland, what remains from that, and then what's the capacity in the city to accommodate this housing given existing zoning, and in Woodland's case, also including the annexation of the RTSP, or the Research and Technology Park Specific Plan. So right now, Woodland has about 143 vacant sites that can accommodate a little over 2,628 units. And that's important because new to the sixth cycle, you have to maintain the sites to accommodate your RHNA at each income level throughout the entire 8-year process. So it's recommended to have a little bit of excess capacity over RHNA so that you don't have to find extra sites if a site develops that was set aside for below market rate housing that develops at market rate or develops in some other way that isn't anticipated by the housing plan. So, there's room here for 827 units above the RENA, which is actually a very comfortable number so that you don't have to keep going back and looking for new sites as things develop over the next 8 years. So go to the next slide, please. Here's a map, and Woodland's broken up into two to make it a little bit more eligible, of the north side and the south side of the city, that shows where housing can currently be accommodated under Woodland's existing development codes and zoning requirements. There's a couple of things to remember. One, the sites that are obligated on the map are identified on the map under no obligation to develop housing, affordable housing or otherwise. It's still private property, and you can dispose of it according to the zoning, however best fits your goals and objectives. Again, the state uses the allowable density per acre to determine whether it's above moderate or lower income housing. So it, again, does not compel a private property owner to do any particular type of housing development or do anything with their property other than they had been conceiving of it. One thing that's also important to point out here is that for Woodland is not requiring any changes in zoning. We're writing 11 housing elements in cities around the state, many of which now have to go back and revise their zoning in some way to allow for this additional housing. And Woodland's general plan and current zoning code and expectations for annexations within the sphere of influence are sufficient to meet the RENA requirements. You go show the south side so that people have a chance to take a look at that on the next slide as well.
I'd actually like to just make one comment regarding the sites, is that to qualify as lower income, the default density is 30. The site has to be 30 units to the acre or denser, a higher density, and it has to be between half an acre and can be no larger than 10 acres. So there are a couple of sites here that didn't meet the size requirement, which is one reason why they're shown as moderate instead of low income. So HCD had very specific criteria that were used to identify, for the cities to identify sites.
So, and then here is, and this is all in the draft documents and in your packet, but again, Woodland, we want to make sure everybody can see the details. So here is the south side of the city. Again, there's a implementation plan that's required. The goals are set out by this process of how to accommodate. And there's really 4 overarching goals, and nested within there are policies and programs to meet those goals. And they all include a timeline for completion and who's responsible for this in the implementation plan. But the 4 main goals sort of that overarch the implementation plan are: one is to making sure that the adequate housing for persons at all income levels and special needs and protected classes will have access to housing, and that housing will continue to be developed within Woodland. Want to have a goal to encourage preservation, maintenance, and improvement of existing housing, particularly housing that is legally under covenants to remain affordable. Equal opportunity, again, meeting the state requirements and federal law for fair housing, but also to make sure that housing is open to all without discrimination on the basis of family status, marital status, age, sex, religion, race, ethnicity, national origin, disability. All of we want to maintain discrimination-free marketplace for housing in Woodland. And finally, energy conservation and sustainable housing development, encouraging development and construction standards which encourage energy and resource conservation and sustainable practices in residential development, which, by the way, includes that maintenance and preservation of existing units, because one of the greenest things you can do is to keep the existing housing stock and not replace it and send all that material to the landfill and et cetera, et cetera. So maintenance of existing housing is a green strategy. Go to the next slide, please. So we'll talk a little bit about the review process. Again, the public review was released on May 14th and then also sent to HCD.
Yes, you moved quickly through the slide. We've already had
go
all
right
these.
ahead then. Let's go to
Let's
the next
move
slide.
right to the slide, please. Thank you.
So some revisions here, they're in your packet. Edits are in green highlight. And again, focus on the affirmatively furthering fair housing because we got new direction from the state. Next slide, please. And then comments that came from the that before August 5th, those are shown in the yellow highlights and on the site's inventory, technical analysis, and on public outreach. So Cindy, why don't you tell us about next steps then?
Yes. So our next steps are to, upon adoption, resubmit the housing element to HCD, and we hope that they provide certification of the housing element this winter. And again, we feel we've addressed all of their comments, so we hope that there will be no further amendments that are needed to the document. So with that, staff recommends that City Council certify the housing element, approve the resolution amending the general plan to replace the housing element with the 6th cycle, and direct staff to transmit the document to the State Department of Housing and Community Development.
Well, thank you very much, Cindy, and thank you, David Bergman, for a very comprehensive report. We know this is a lot of work. I know 3 of us have not had any exposure to this before, so it was good that we had to go through all of it. At this time, I'm going to open the public hearing and ask the clerk if there is anybody who wishes to comment on the draft housing element as considered by the council this evening.
Mayor Stallard, hold on. Okay, thank you. I'm having some technical difficulties. I don't see anyone raising their hand.
And, we do have one person raising their hand.
Okay. Oh, you do? Okay. I don't have any emails.
All right. Well, let's hear from the commenter and then we'll go to council discussion.
Hello, can you try to speak?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Your name,
All right,
please?
hello, Mayor Stallard and council members. My name is Charlene DeWitt. I'm a staff attorney with Legal Services of Northern California. And I just wanted to say that we are extremely grateful for the work that Cindy and the other staff members have put into this housing element. We are especially grateful that they considered all of our comments and made some really robust improvements to a number of areas of the element, including the affirmatively furthering fair housing, making sure that there were sites for low and very low income residents of Woodland, and also making sure that the programs that they have in place are extremely well thought out and measurable with very specific goals in mind, so that it's clear the progress that they're making towards those goals. We're really excited about the annexation project for the Research and Technology Park. So we'll definitely be keeping a close eye on that as we eagerly await that new area in Woodland. But all in all, I just wanted to say how grateful that we are to have been included in this process, and that Cindy and folks did a really great job.
Well, thank you, Charlene. That's high praise. We really appreciate your engagement with the process. And we're really happy that the meeting of the minds was, as you've indicated, that's a win-win for everybody. Thank you, Cindy, again for that. Was there any further comments from the public, Madam Clerk?
No, none.
All right. At this time, I'll respectfully close the public hearing. Bring it back to council for questions, comments, and action. Members of the council, does anybody have a question or a comment? Member Garcia Cadena.
Thank you, Mayor Stallard, and thank you to everyone who worked on this. This is amazing. I do, when I was looking over everything here, I do have a quick question. Table 3-1, when I'm looking at the summary, it says given the I don't have glasses on, 431, and then it's stricken, and 449, and it looks like it's also stricken. So I'm wondering, in comparing this, which one of those is correct? Is it the 449? I'm sorry, it's page 153.
3-1?
Yes. So in the summary, I think it's page 153.
Or 153?
Page 153, it says summary of adequate sites. It's the second sentence down.
I'm not sure that I have found exactly where you're talking. Yes, on page 14, I'm going to just hold it up.
I'm sorry. Okay, it's on page 13. It's on page 13. And it's the bottom paragraph there under summary of adequate sites.
Oh, I see.
So third sentence in there, given the 421.
Oh, the 421 looks like it has a strike through on it.
So is it 421 stricken or is 449 stricken?
You know, it's actually 421 is stricken and 449 is correct. So
Okay.
You're right. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. And I just wanted to say that, I'm really happy reading over this, that I really appreciate the providing ample opportunity for our lower income residents. That's stood out, and the sustainability, housing, and energy conservation. So thank you so much. It's obvious that a lot of work went into this, and I appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you, Member Garcia Cadena. Anyone else have a question or comment?
I do, Mr. Mayor.
Please proceed.
And it's in the form of a question to Cindy Norris. Cindy, I hate to be the cloud over your parade, but I thank you for the work that you've done as well as your consultants. Great work. But are you familiar with the state auditor's November 20th report to the legislature on what a dismal failure this project has been for the last 50 years?
I am not familiar with that auditor's report. And do you mean in general in the state of California?
Yes, it turns out to be a shell game, that even though the state promulgates these recommendations and requirements for cities and counties, that so many cities and across California have been able to dodge by playing the shell game. For example, the city of Newport Beach, 4 low-income housing units in 8 years, and where the city right next to it has 4,000 units. It's a shell game. The reality is, even though you put together a good plan, without the proper financing, these developers cannot develop these 143 sites that you have identified. It's disgusting when I go through our city and see these beautiful sites that could build, houses and small complexes, but these folks aren't able to finance it. And even though you have a beautiful plan, it sits there as a plan because it can't be implemented because of the horrible crisis that our state housing, including HCD, has placed us in. I blame HCD and the state of California for the homeless population, for a significant number of the homeless population in the state of California. This has been 50 years of dismal failure of finding solutions to low-income housing in the state of California. It comes down to financing. What can we do as a city to help these developers implement their plans? And they've got plans, Cindy, you know that. They're ready to go. They got their shovels ready to go. And they've got units identified for some of these 143 vacant lots in our city that would meet RENA and meet all the requirements of the state. but what can we do as a city to find a way to get these developers financed?
Well,
If I could interrupt there, Mr. Landsberg, as I reported at the front end of the meeting, First Northern Bank, Suncrest Bank, and Five Star Bank have recently, using their Community Reinvestment Act obligation under federal law, have indicated that they're willing to put up $100 million for financing. It's not grants again, but this will specifically be targeted for affordable housing. So the financing piece is a problem. I'd just like to say we in Woodland have done a fairly good job with affordable housing over the years. I know that some communities have dodged it, shall we say, as you put it, but I think Woodland has always done a pretty good job. And we've committed to being inclusive as best we can. But you're right, we don't control all the economic effects. The Mutual Housing of Spring Lake won an international award for farm worker housing. It was the first totally net zero in the world, farm worker housing. So I just would like to respectfully say, I think our community is doing a fairly reasonable to good job. And to hear our legal services person speak highly of the effort, to me also affirms that we're doing a good job. And I like you, wish that everybody would assume their share of the burden. So
the proof of it is in the pudding, Mr. Mayor. And the Mutual Housing is a beautiful unit at $350,000 a unit. And the units on Beamer and Cottonwood were $280,000 a unit. I don't find that affordable at all. Private developers can build housing for much less than that if they just get the financing to do it. Thank you. I'm off my soapbox.
All right. All right. Additional comments or questions from the council? I think this is a very reasonable effort and good effort. I think the one question I have is if something's designated moderate in that little map you showed, could it become a low income housing area?
Any housing site ultimately could become an affordable housing site.
Right. Specifically, let me be specific. I've always felt the large triangle of land at Kentucky and East Street could be a great mobile home park site. I think people are coming to realize mobile homes were the original tiny homes, and well-designed and well-implemented parks can be very nice. We have we have Royal Palm and Idlewheels and Leisureville as, to me, great examples of successful mobile home living. And I'm wanting to know, by designating it moderate, does that preclude that kind of development in that area?
It doesn't preclude anything. The reason it's designated moderate is because it doesn't meet that size requirement. HCD has a requirement that the sites can't be any more than 10 acres to qualify on this map as a low-income site, and the site is over 10 acres.
I understand the developer actually wants to retain frontage on Kentucky for commercial purposes. So in other words, it could ultimately be a smaller site than you see at the moment. All right, that was my only comment. Anybody else want to weigh in before we proceed to action? Member Fernandez.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Stallard. I have a couple of questions for clarification. Going through the report, there was an issue on annexation of property that has not been annexed that we're counting in the housing element. Could you just clarify that for me again?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And in fact, the state actually provides a process whereby cities can count lands for future annexation, and in a way, they almost encourage annexation of lands to increase the ability to have more housing available. So the state gives a community up to 3 years to, let's say we weren't even as far as we were on the Research and Tech Park. we have up to 3 years to complete the annexation process. And then we just have to indicate and say, and be realistic that how many housing units do we think will actually potentially could be built within the 8-year cycle. And that's what we've included in the table. We know that research process is actually pretty far down the road. I mean, and I think we'll be coming back in the near future for final action, which actually puts us pretty far ahead. And it is very likely that a certain percentage of the units will be able to be built within an 8-year time frame after adoption of the housing element. And that's the estimate that we've provided based on the, I think there was the estimate that was provided in the environmental document of assumed build out at a certain time frame. And the table actually only takes 50% of that assumed build out to be conservative.
Okay, and Cindy, can you clarify also, since the city has accepted in lieu fees, how does that impact the 837 units that were earmarked in that research and tech park?
Oh, in the research and tech park. In terms of, are you asking, would they be allowed to do in lieu fees?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically, yeah.
Well, my understanding is the way it's going to be written is they would be subject to the city's existing affordable housing ordinance, which does provide for the possibility of paying in lieu fees.
So those units could actually not be built in that area, correct?
Yes, there is that possibility.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then my other question, and I just want to clarify, I realized that the Legal Services of Northern California spoke on behalf of the city, but I just wanted to clarify some comments in their letter that they wrote that has been a concern of mine, and again, focusing on the development of property and low-income housing, specifically in certain areas of our community. And in their letter, there is a statement: the current sites would function to perpetuate segregation and continue to exclude low-income households from the high opportunity areas in the southern and western parts of the city. So I just want to clarify for myself that when we allow the in lieu fees to exist, that we somehow are not holding developers accountable to build affordable or low-income housing in all areas of our community. So I just want to advocate that we examine the process so that we are not allowing just low-income housing in certain corridors of our community, specifically along the east end of town, along the opportunity zones, along East Street. So I just want to know what the city or what we're doing to try to not perpetuate that.
Right. So we took those comments to heart from Legal Services, and we examined the one area that's called high resource that's in the southwest part of the city. And the issue there is that there's very little open vacant land or land that could be, there probably are some pieces that maybe could be repurposed at some future time. But we have actually incorporated the idea that, and actually I think the state's even moving forward on legislation that would allow for the additional units to be built in some of the single family developments, in single family neighborhoods. The other thing that the city is really, I think, would try to do is provide additional amenities and improvements in areas that are low resource to help, because when you do provide investment in an area, it improves values and resources in the area. And whether that means improving the roadway, adding new roads, other amenities. And so those are some of the strategies that the city has proposed, as well as, like I said, I think we included a program to make sure we continue funding first-time homebuyer to encourage more homeownership throughout the city. And so those types of programs.
Thank you, Cindy. And just one more comment. I think there was also a comment made about the accessibility of the process for individuals without perhaps the resources to the internet. And again, making sure that we're reaching all community members within every area of our community. So I know that was something that was also addressed in their letter. So just wanting to make sure that we're being as inclusive as possible. So thank you.
Okay.
Mayor Stollard, I have some comments.
Oh, sorry. Mayor Pro Tem Vega.
Thank you. Cindy, thank you so much. I so appreciate the printout also and the bound. This is a lot of material to consume, and I appreciated having it printed out. Appreciate all the work that went into this. I also just wanted to share my concern, or the concern that Councilwoman Fernandez brought up around the in lieu fees. Just the fact that when we offer that up and those units aren't built, and it just concerns me as I think about communities being developed without accessibility to households that are lower income. So that's something that I want to keep front and center to ensure that when we look down the road, 20, 30 years down the road, we haven't created a situation where there's parts of the community that aren't accessible to folks of lower income.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'd like to comment here. I haven't been around here for a while. In lieu fees aren't all bad. If anything, it helps us aggregate money for some things for which we need to aggregate money. An example would be mutual housing Spring Lake. Money that came off the piece of individual houses helped pay for that complex. And during the recessionary years, when no houses were being built in Spring Lake, we still got Roachdale Grange completed. We got mutual housing Spring Lake completed.
Uh-oh.
He's frozen, right?
Yeah, frozen.
Uh-oh.
Frozen.
Still frozen, right?
Yeah.
Has to restart.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I think all right, I think he's frozen.
So Mayor Pro Tem, is Jay still on? Could we have Jay check on him, and then and if that's not the case, then I think we should probably move forward with the vote on this item. Anna, are you on? Is anyone?
I'm on. He just got kicked out. I don't even see Mayor Stallard anymore.
He may be restarting the computer.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe we can just give it a minute. I think we were close to the end, so because I think the next logical thing to do would be to take a vote on it, and it would be good if he was here for that.
Okay, I see him popping up.
Yes.
Could I just sorry.
I'm back. I'm sorry, we had a technical failure here. I don't know where I got cut off, but I just want to say, I think we're doing a reasonable job here, and we've got a fair amount of affordable housing that's been built into our southeast area, and I think we should make sure we try to do that also in the expansion area as we go forward. And now I'll turn it back over to Councilmember Fernandez.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was unmuted. I just wanted, before we take a vote, I don't know if it matters on our recommendation for action. It's states that
Before you say that, we've done the staff report, we've held the public hearing. We have to do three things: certify the housing element, adopt a resolution amending the general plan, to replace the existing housing element, and to direct staff to transmit the final document, which I presume, Mr. Walsh, we can do as a single motion.
Yes, you can.
All right, so that's the action we're looking at. Vicki, please proceed.
Right. And I just wanted to clarify and just make note of that on our packet, it's 2029, not 2019. If it matters.
Yeah, and item B of the recommendation for action, there's a typo there. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, we're not going back to the future, we're going forward to the future.
Just wanted to make sure that when we make that resolution,
it's correct on the resolution. I was looking at it earlier. All right. Vicki, would you like to make the motion tonight to proceed with these actions?
Yes, Mayor Sallard, thank you. I'll make motion that we adopt the resolution.
The three different actions: certification of the housing element, the amending of the general plan, and the directing of the staff to transmit. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. We have Councilmember Fernandez recommending moving the recommended action. Is there a second?
I'll second, Mayor. Oh,
Thank
Tanya,
you.
sorry.
Nope, you go ahead. That's fine.
All right. We'll put down the Mayor Pro Tem on that one. And presuming there's no further discussion, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Vega,
Aye.
Councilmember Fernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena,
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg,
Aye, as long as we look at that.
Mayor Stallard.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. That concludes the action on item 16. Thank you so much, Cindy, for all the hard work. Thank you, David Bergman and your colleagues. Thank you. We're grateful to be at this point. And now the staff can send it forward to the city. And this will not be revisited for 8 years unless there's further requirements from the legislature. All right. That brings us to the final item of the evening, and that is the appointment of a designated delegate for the annual League of California Cities Conference. I had in my box today a list of the resolutions that are going to be presented. There's only 3 of them. One's on securing railroad property maintenance. One is on online sales tax equity, in which the city has already sent a letter in support of the legislation. And the third is securing railroad property maintenance. So it looks like 2 on the same subject. So in any event, it will be taken up on the final day of the League of California Cities Convention. That's a week from Friday, I believe. We need somebody to be our representative. Do I have a volunteer? Anybody?
I'll be out of the county and in LA County that weekend, so I won't be able to make it.
All right. So we don't have you. Do you want to nominate somebody?
Sure, I'd like to nominate, if she's available, Vicki Fernandez.
Oh, Councilmember Fernandez, would you be able to accept this?
Thank you, Mayor Stallard and Mayor and Councilmember Landsberg. But unfortunately, I have grandmother duties that I provide childcare for, so I can't accept. Sorry.
All right. I will take on the responsibility then, unless somebody else wants to do it. All right. No, is there any objection to my taking that on?
I'll nominate the mayor, Tom Stallard, if I can get it.
All right.
Second on that.
Oh,
Okay.
I will second that.
Seconded by Vicki. All right. Motion by Landsberg, second by Fernandez. For the discussion, being none, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Vega,
Aye.
Councilmember Fernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena,
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg,
Aye.
Mayor Stallard.
Aye.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, colleagues and staff, for another successful meeting. We are prepared to adjourn We'll be back at the we'll be back on the 21st, third Tuesday in September. And meanwhile, we were going to again adjourn in memory of three wonderful citizens of our community, retired Fire Captain Eldon Knapp, retired YMCA Director Bruce Alquist, and retired County Tax Assessor Alan Flory. With that, friends, we are adjourned. Good night.
Good night.